Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining us to talk about experiential empathy. Today I'm going to talk about how my partner, Noor Syed, and I encouraged awareness and empathy for diversity through experiential practice simulations. First, I'd like to tell you who we are and what we do. My name is Farah Valera, and I'm a faculty member at Lehigh University in instructional design and instructional technology in the College of Ed. I teach teachers and aspiring designers and technologists to create learning environments and materials using innovative technologies. My partner, Dr. Syed, is also a faculty member at Lehigh University and focuses on autism and special education. We teamed up to develop a scenario that my graduate students could walk through to gain empathy to become better designers. I first became really interested and invested in empathy, diversity awareness, and instruction when I was a sociology instructor about a decade ago. I was teaching at a community college, and it had an incredibly strong program geared towards students who were deaf and hearing impaired. I was thrilled and excited and incredibly fortunate that I got the opportunity to be one of the instructors in this program. I thought my ability to speak slowly, to include detailed notes external to my lectures, and provide multimedia resources for my students was going to make me a well-rounded faculty member aware of my students' diverse needs. I found out very quickly there was so much more than just adding additional resources and materials. I was teaching a lesson on leadership and group characteristics using Dr. Seuss's story about the Sneetches. I found a video on YouTube and was thrilled that I could actually demonstrate these concepts using media. What I didn't realize was about a decade ago, YouTube didn't have very good closed captions. Not that they're that much better now, but transcripts were also completely unavailable. I watched as my student turned his attention from the video to his interpreter and back to the video, completely confused. The interpreter was trying so hard to sign Sneetches and all of these other completely made-up words that meant absolutely nothing to my student. My activity was a complete failure, and like the Sneetches, I learned a hard lesson that day. We have to be more thoughtful and empathetic of our students' needs as educators. As my research changed and my focus moved from sociology to education and instructional design, I began to notice the lack of development of empathy and tolerance skills built into education. So my work has moved in that direction over the past several years. The problem is not truly a problem. It's more of what's happening in the world and how humans are not able to keep up with change. Diversity in terms of race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, ability or disability, language learning, immigration status, all of those things are changing exponentially, and people are incredibly slow to adapt to changing situations and circumstances. What we'd like to see our students become is not just culturally competent, but culturally aware of other people and their differences, as well as their own biases. This takes active participation skills along with changes in your brain and personality in order to become more thoughtful and more aware of our differences, and how those differences can be both positive and a benefit when collaborating and communicating and connecting with others unlike ourselves. We wanted our students to understand the difference between just learning about competence, knowing full well we'll never be completely competent about every possible difference between individuals in the world. But we wanted to encourage cultural humility and have our students be aware of their own place and their own differences and their own intersectionalities, and be aware of what they don't know. Our challenge was to find out how to teach these things. Our solution was to develop some sort of multicultural competency training. Get our students to see that there are knowledge components of each of these differences in individuals, as well as skills like communication and collaboration needed to navigate interactions and connect with people who are very unlike themselves. Ultimately, we want our students to change or tweak or develop more positive attitudes towards people who are different, and at least become aware of their own biases. So we were considering, can we teach them empathy? There's no universal definition of empathy, and we don't really know exactly how to go about teaching a feeling in an appropriate way that we can say is completely successful. Take, for instance, this example of 4 elements of empathy. All 4 of these elements encourage us to take the perspective of others in order to better understand how they're thinking and feeling so we don't react in our own single-minded way. We decided to try to develop these 4 elements of empathy in a simulation. We understand that simulating activities and events can be incredibly helpful in allowing students to participate in a safe space or a safe place, and then react on those experiences in order to hopefully get them to see things they might not have had the opportunity to see or experience in the real world. Our desired objectives were relatively simple and straightforward. We wanted our students to be more empathetic of their audiences and be more thoughtful designers. To do that, we wanted to give them an experiential learning opportunity of an authentic simulated activity that other students might experience, so that they could internalize some of those feelings themselves. The activity development itself was also incredibly simple. The content of the activity was arbitrary, so we decided to focus on agriculture. I took a paragraph straight from Wikipedia that described agriculture in very simple terms. I found a video of a teacher's visit to a farm on YouTube. I embedded a few questions in a Google form and asked the students draw a picture of some animals and the sounds that they made. I put all of these things in a website and prepared students for the challenge. The content wasn't guiding the activity. It was designed to have students experience this activity from a completely different perspective. The class of students would experience this activity from one of 4 simulated statuses. Some would be hearing impaired, some visually impaired, some would be language learners, while others were dyslexic. In order to simulate these differences thoughtfully and respectfully, some students wore noise-canceling headphones that canceled out some noise, but not all. Some were wearing goggles that had Vaseline smeared on the inside of the lenses, so they could see, but not very well. Others looked at the same website, written in Spanish, while being known English speakers. While others experienced the website with a bookmark that made the letters become jumbled to emulate dyslexia. The simulations were spaced out around the computer lab classroom. For instance, a student who was wearing goggles was not seated next to another student who was wearing goggles. Students were asked to sit at a computer and access either one of the physical manipulatives provided, either the goggles or the headphones, or view the Spanish or dyslexic websites. The moment the students put on their manipulatives or viewed the altered websites, there were several confused glances, some nervous laughter, and the room became completely silent. Students quickly realized the difficulties of the activity given their new challenge to overcome. Some students quietly asked their neighbors for help in getting started. Others immediately went to the accessibility options available on their computers. Maybe they turned up the speakers to hear better, maybe they enlarged the screen to see better, some of them accessed Google Translate, but a good chunk of them sat frozen at their machines and appeared openly frustrated. Some were completely defeated. But in all of the times that I've run this activity, not one student asked me for help, the instructor. I've run this activity in 4 classes over the past 2 years, and students usually spend about 20 minutes completing the activity before turning their drawings in as instructed. Afterwards, everyone reflects with their group about their thoughts, their feelings, the struggles, and the implications of their experience on the future of their designs. We discuss empathy in detail, and we spend the remainder of those classes working in groups on a project management plan for their next project, which happens to be an augmented reality game. A few weeks later, students are asked how the activity impacted their designs of their plan and eventually their game. So here's what we found. Normally, I don't like to give a lot of slides with a great deal of text on them, but I feel that demonstrating some of the actual words the students said is incredibly important. Immediately following the activity, students mentioned it was relevant, helpful, and necessary. They wanted their own students or audience to do the activity. Many of them said other faculty members in the department or any program should do this activity. And they said it should be required practice in all of their courses. I asked them to talk about their feelings. Many said they were scared, overwhelmed, and immediately intimidated. A lot said they were unaware of their computer's accessibility options. They didn't even know there was a button to make the screen larger. Several felt alienated, afraid to ask for help. They didn't want to look dumb in front of me. Several of them said once they did freeze, they were immediately disengaged. They didn't want to participate in the project at all, and they just sat there hoping it would end. Eventually, they realized that the other students were doing something, so they had to do something, and their work and pace was so much slower than others. I asked about their reactions to the project and how it made them feel in terms of gaining empathy or understanding empathy. Most of them said it helped them to understand their own students or audiences better. It helped them think about how their students and audiences must feel in similar situations. A lot of them talked about how their English language learners often sat quietly and appeared too nervous to talk. Many of them began developing plans as to how to accomplish the task by adapting to their new status and how to figure out how to get by and get through it, which led one student to mention they were thinking of a way to defeat the disability. After that, students said that there was huge debate in the class, a deep discussion on empathy, accommodations, universal design for learning, and differentiation of instruction. And the students resoundingly agreed that we need to embrace the idea of not defeating a disability, but of the rest of us accepting and adapting to that ability or disability to help all of those students to not be left behind. I mentioned that I asked my students how this project impacted their designs. A few weeks later, students stated that they designed their AR games to include diversity or multicultural components or themes. Some thought about how they communicated and collaborated with their group members, as many were language learners, and still others thought about their audience of learners in terms of what they might want or need in an AR game, rather than providing what they think they need or want in an AR game. And every single one of those students talked about the importance of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA compliance, in the design of any of their activities and learning materials going forward. Overall, the simulation has been wonderful. My students tell me regularly that they want other folks to participate, and I couldn't be happier to see the amount of empathy work that they do in the designs and the development of all of their activities now. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to either myself or my partner, Dr. Syed, at the email addresses listed below. Enjoy the rest of your conference.